Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving deeper into one of the most important aspects of learning English. A lot of learners struggle with speaking because they're afraid of making mistakes. But guess what? Mistakes are actually a good thing. They help you grow.
That's such an important point, Sophia. I think a lot of people hold themselves back because they don't want to sound silly or get something wrong. But the reality is, even native speakers make mistakes. We mix up words, we mispronounce things, and sometimes we forget what we were saying mid-sentence. It's completely normal.
Exactly. The difference is that native speakers don't let it stop them from continuing the conversation. When a learner hesitates or freezes up because they're scared of saying something wrong, it actually makes the conversation harder. The best thing you can do is just keep going.
Absolutely. Confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from pushing through even when you make mistakes. So, let's talk about some practical ways to build confidence in speaking English.
One of my favorite techniques is shadowing. Basically, you listen to a native speaker and repeat what they say, mimicking their pronunciation, tone. Comfortable with the language and improve your speaking skills.
But it's really helpful. When you listen to yourself, you can hear what you're doing well and what needs improvement. And over time,
Try to form sentences directly in English. It might be hard at first, but the more you do it, the faster and more natural your speaking will become.
Oh, definitely! I always tell learners to start with simple thoughts. Like, if you're making coffee in the morning, describe what you're doing in English. I'm boiling water. I'm adding sugar. It seems small, but it trains your brain to use English without translating.
and let's not forget about using filler words. A lot of learners think they have to speak in full, perfect sentences, but even native speakers fillers like, "Huh?" and well when they're thinking. It makes your speech sound more natural and gives you time to think without panicking.
That's such a great tip. Speaking naturally isn't about speaking perfectly. It's about keeping the conversation flowing. And speaking of conversations, let's talk about real-life practice. The best way to gain confidence is to actually use English in conversations.
100%. If you don't have native speakers around you, there are so many ways to practice online. Language exchange apps, online speaking clubs, or even comedy on social media posts in English. It all helps.
And if you're nervous about speaking to others, start small. And just saying a sentence or two out loud every day, big difference. The more you speak, the more comfortable you'll become.
I love all these ideas. The way here is that confidence comes with practice. The more you use English, the more natural it will feel. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Keep pushing yourself, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Exactly. And remind yourself that every conversation, even the ones where you struggle, is making you better.
Right? And one day you'll look back and realize how far you've come. So just keep going.
I love this energy. Let's keep the conversation going. There's so much more to explore when it comes to improving confidence in English. So let's dive even deeper. What are some personal struggles you guys have faced while learning a new language?
Oh, I've definitely had my share of struggles. When I was learning Spanish, one of my biggest challenges was overthinking. I'd try to translate things in my head before speaking, and by the time I was ready to say something, the conversation had already moved on.
I can relate to that. I used to feel the same way when I was learning French. I was so worried about getting the grammar right that I would hesitate too much. But then I realized that even if I made mistakes, most people still understood what I was trying to say. That was a game changer for me.
That's such a great realization. I think a lot of learners struggle with that. trying to get everything perfect before they even say a word. But honestly, perfection isn't the goal. Communication is.
Absolutely. One thing that really helped me was forcing myself to speak without preparing too much in my head. It was uncomfortable at first, but over time I got better at just going with the flow.
That's a great approach. Another thing that helped me was thinking in chunks instead of word by word translations. Instead of worrying about every individual word, I started memorizing common phrases and expressions. That way, I could respond quickly without overanalyzing everything.
That's a fantastic tip. Learning chunks of language instead of just individual words makes a huge difference. It speeds up your speaking and makes you sound more natural.
Exactly, like instead of thinking, how do I say I don't know in French? I just memorized, Jeannie says pass, as a full phrase. That way it became automatic.
And that's something English learners can do too. There are so many useful phrases in English that can help you sound fluent faster. Like instead of trying to translate, that's interesting, word by word, just learn it as a whole phrase.
Yes. And let's not forget the power of body language and tone. Even if your words aren't perfect, the way you say them can help get your message across.
Oh, for sure. I've had conversations where I didn't know the exact words I needed, but using my hands, facial expressions, and tone helped a lot. And usually, the other person helped me find the right words along the way.
That's a great point. Language is more than just words, it's how you use them. And speaking with confidence, even if you make mistakes, makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening, don't stress too much about getting every little detail perfect. Focus on communicating and enjoying the process.
Right. The more fun you have with it, the more you'll improve.
And speaking of fun, have you guys ever had any funny language mishaps while learning? Because I definitely have.
Oh, this is going to be good. Let's hear it.
Alright, so when I was learning Spanish, I once tried to compliment a friend's cooking. I wanted to say, this food is very delicious, which instead, it's comida es muy deliciosa. But instead, I mixed up the words and said, esta comida es muy embarazada.
Oh no!
Wait. Doesn't embarazada mean pregnant in Spanish?
Exactly. So instead of saying, this food is delicious, I basically said, this food is very pregnant. My friend
Means embarrassed because it sounds like it, but nope.
This is such a great example of why it's okay to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process, and honestly, these moments make learning a language so much more fun.
Oh, for sure. I had a similar experience when I was learning French. I was in a cafe in Paris, and I wanted to ask for some more ice in my drink. So I confidently walked up to the counter and said, Je veux plus de glace. But the way I said it made it sound like I was asking for more ice cream instead of just ice.
Oh no!
So what happened?
The barista just gave me this huge scoop of ice cream in a cup, and I was too embarrassed to correct myself, so I just took it and sat back down, pretending that's exactly what I wanted.
That's amazing. At least you got some ice cream out of it.
See, this is why confidence is key. Even if you make a mistake, just roll with it. People usually understand, and sometimes you end up with a funny story and a free dessert.
Exactly. And making these mistakes actually helped me learn faster. Because after that ice cream incident, I never forgot how to properly ask for ice again.
That's a great point. Mistakes stick with you, but in a good way. I still remember my pregnant food mistake, and now I'll never confuse deliciosa and barazada again.
This just proves that mistakes are actually learning opportunities. And the more you put yourself out there, the more chances you have to learn.
100%. And I think that's why immersion is so powerful. When you're constantly surrounded by a language, you learn way faster than if you're just studying grammar from a book.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But what do you guys think? Do you think someone can become fluent without full immersion? just by studying and practicing in their own country?
That's an interesting question. Let's dive into that. What do you think, Jacob?
I think it's definitely possible to become fluent without full immersion, but it takes a lot more effort and discipline. If you're not living in a country where the language is spoken, you have to actively create an immersive environment for yourself.
Right. Like surrounding yourself with English through movies, podcasts, and even changing your phone's language settings.
Absolutely. And don't forget talking to native speakers online. There are so many apps and websites where you can practice with real people.
Yeah, and speaking is so important. I know a lot of learners focus on reading and listening because it feels safer, but actually speaking the language, even if you make mistakes, is what really helps you improve.
I totally agree. I've seen people who study for years but struggle with real conversations because they've never actually spoken to a native speaker.
That's why I always encourage people to start speaking from day one. Even if it's just a few simple sentences, the earlier you start, the faster you gain confidence.
And confidence is key. I mean, think about how kids learn languages. They don't worry about grammar rules at first. They just try to communicate.
That's so true. Kids pick up languages naturally because they're not afraid of making mistakes.
Exactly. So, if you're learning English, don't wait until you feel ready to speak. Just start now. Even if it's small conversations with yourself or a language partner.
That reminds me, have you ever tried talking to yourself in another language?
Oh, I do that all the time. I'll describe what I'm doing, like I'm making coffee, or I need to go to the store. It helps me think in the language.
That's actually a great technique. When you start thinking in English, instead of translating from your native language, you know you're making real progress.
Yeah, and another great trick is shadowing. Have you guys heard of that?
Oh, yeah. That's when you listen to a native speaker and repeat what they say as quickly as possible, right?
Exactly. It helps with pronunciation and fluency. If you do it with TV shows or podcasts, it's like practicing real conversations.
Speaking of TV shows, do you guys think watching with or without subtitles is better for learning?
That's a tough one. I think it depends on your level. What do you think, Sophia?
I'd say it really depends on your goal. If you're a beginner, using subtitles in your native language can help you understand the context. But if you're at an intermediate level, switching to English subtitles is a great way to train your brain to connect words with meaning faster.
That makes sense. And once you feel more comfortable, you can try watching without subtitles at all. It's tough at first, but over time, you get used to the rhythm of natural speech.
Yeah, and it forces you to rely more on listening skills instead of reading. But I think it also depends on the type of content. Some shows use varial and slow English, while others have a lot of slang or fast speech.
Exactly. If someone is just starting out, I'd recommend shows with clear pronunciation, like documentaries or educational content. Then, once they get more confident, they can move on to dramas or even reality shows, where people speak more casually.
That's a great strategy. And what about books? Do you think reading helps with speaking skills?
Definitely, reading helps you learn new vocabulary and sentence structures. But the trick is to read aloud sometimes. So you're not just recognizing words, but actually practicing saying them.
That's a great tip. And choosing books that match your level is important too. If a book is too difficult, you might get frustrated and give up.
True. I think graded readers are a great resource. They're books written specifically for language learners, so they use simple vocabulary and gradually introduce more complex language.
Yeah, and audiobooks can be helpful too. If you listen to the audio while reading along, it improves both pronunciation and comprehension.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest challenges for learners is staying motivated. When learning feels slow, people get discouraged.
That's so true. I think a good way to stay motivated is by setting small, achievable goals. Instead of saying, I want to be fluent, try something like, I want to learn 10 new words this week, or I want to have a 5-minute conversation in English.
Yeah, and celebrating progress is important. Even small improvements, like understanding a movie scene without subtitles, show that you're getting better.
Exactly. Progress isn't always obvious, but if you look back, you'll realize how far you've come.
And another tip, finding a study buddy or joining a language group helps a lot. Learning alone can feel isolating, but practicing with others makes it fun and social.
That's a great point. When you're part of a group, you feel more accountable, and you get to learn from others' mistakes too.
Yes. And speaking of mistakes, let's talk about fear of making mistakes in English. So many learners feel embarrassed to speak because they worry about saying something wrong.
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing, making mistakes is actually a good sign. It means you're trying, and every mistake is a chance to learn.
Yeah, no one expects you to speak perfectly, and native speakers make mistakes too. The important thing is to keep going and not let fear stop you.
I love that mindset. What do you think is the best way to overcome that fear?
One of the best ways to overcome that fear is to change the way you think about mistakes. Instead of seeing them as something bad, think of them as a natural part of learning. If you never make mistakes, you're probably not challenging yourself enough.
Exactly. And I think it helps to practice in low-pressure situations. For example, start by speaking to yourself in English. Talk about your day, what you see around you, or even record yourself speaking. This way, you build confidence before speaking with others.
That's a great idea. And another tip is to find people.
Yes, language exchange partners are amazing for this. You help them with your native language, and they help you with English. It's a win-win, and there's less pressure because they know what it's like to be a learner too.
Right? And speaking little by little helps. You don't have to even
That's a good point. The more you use English in your daily life, the more natural it becomes. Even small habits, like thinking in English instead of translating, can help a lot.
Yes, thinking in English is a great way to practice when you don't have someone to talk to. If you see a tree, instead of thinking, and then translating it to tree, just think tree directly. It makes your brain process English faster.
That's actually something I did when I was learning a new language. I would describe things around me in that language in my head. Over time, it really helped me think faster and more naturally.
And another fun way to practice is to have a word of the day. Choose a new English word every day and try to use it in sentences throughout the day.
Oh, I love that. And if you write the word down and create example sentences, it sticks in your memory even better.
That reminds me, writing is another great way to improve speaking. A lot of people don't realize it, but when you write, you're practicing how to structure sentences, and that helps when you speak too.
Yes, and journaling in English is a great habit. Even if you just write a few sentences about your day, it helps reinforce what you've learned.
And don't worry about making perfect sentences. Just writing something is better than nothing, and over time, your sentences will improve naturally.
That's true. And another tip, if you're watching English videos, try to summarize them in your own words. It helps with both comprehension and speaking.
That's a fantastic idea. You could even pretend you're explaining the video to a friend. It forces you to organize your thoughts in English, which improves fluency.
And if you really want to challenge yourself, try shadowing. Listen to a sentence in an English podcast or video, pause, and repeat it exactly the way the speaker said it. It helps with pronunciation and rhythm.
Yes, shadowing is a great technique. And don't worry if you don't sound perfect at first. The more you do it, the more natural your pronunciation will become.
I love all these tips. The key takeaway here is that learning English isn't just about studying. It's about using the language as much as possible. The more you engage with English in your daily life, the faster you'll improve.
Exactly. And most importantly, don't be afraid to have fun with it. Play English word games, listen to music, and enjoy the process.
Yes, language learning is a journey, and the more relaxed and open you are, the more enjoyable it becomes.
That's the perfect mindset to have. Now, let's talk about another common struggle: how to stay motivated when you feel stuck. What do you guys think?
Oh, that's a big one. Everyone hits a plateau at some point where they feel like they're not improving, even though they're putting in the effort. It can be really frustrating.
Definitely. I think the key is to remind yourself why you started learning English in the first place. If you have a strong reason, like traveling, studying abroad, or career growth, it helps you push through the tough times.
That's a great point. Sometimes, just thinking about your goals can reignite your motivation. But what about when you're really feeling stuck? What can learners do in that situation?
One thing that helps is changing up your learning routine. If you always study with books, try watching more videos. If you only practice writing, try speaking more. A little change can make learning feel fresh again.
Yes, and setting small, achievable goals is a good way to stay motivated. Instead of thinking, I need to become fluent, which can feel overwhelming, break it down. For example, this week, I'll learn 10 new words, or I'll have one conversation in English every day.
That's a great idea. Small wins keep you motivated, and celebrating progress, no matter how small, can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Even something as simple as understanding a joke in English or ordering food without hesitation is progress. A lot of learners don't realize how far they've come because they focus on what they don't know instead of what they've already learned.
That's so true! Keeping a progress journal can help. If you write down what you've learned each week, you can look back and see how much you've improved.
I love that. It's like giving yourself proof that you're getting better. And another way to stay motivated is to make English learning fun. If you only focus on studying, it can feel like a chore. But if you watch movies, play
I remember when I started watching English TV shows without subtitles. It was tough at first, but after a while, I realized I was understanding more and more. That feeling was so motivating.
Yes, finding something you love in English, like a favorite show, book, or even a hobby-related podcast, can keep you engaged. When you're interested in the topic, learning doesn't feel like work.
That's so true. And speaking of hobbies, another great tip is to connect English with your daily interests. If you love cooking, try reading recipes in English. If you enjoy gaming, play in English or join English speaking gaming communities.
That's a fantastic idea. When you combine English with something you already love, you'll naturally want to learn more.
And surrounding yourself with English as much as possible makes a huge difference. Change your phone's language to English. Follow English, speaking social media accounts, and even think in English when possible.
Yes, immersion is key. The more you expose yourself to the language, the faster you improve. Even if you're not in an English-speaking country, you can create an environment around you.
And another important thing, don't compare yourself to others. Everyone learns at their own pace. Instead of thinking, they speak better than me, focus on your own progress.
That's such a great point. Comparison can kill motivation. Instead, look at how far you've come and keep going at your own speed.
For anyone feeling stuck right now, don't give up. Try changing your routine, set small goals, make learning fun, and remind yourself why you started.
Yes, keep going and remember even if you only learn one new word today, that's progress.
That's the perfect mindset to have. Now, let's dive into another interesting topic: common mistakes English learners make and how to fix them. What are some mistakes you've noticed, guys?
Oh, there are so many. One of the biggest mistakes I see is learners translating everything from their native language into English instead of thinking in English. It slows them down and sometimes leads to weird sentence structures.
Yes, that's a huge one. Every language has its own way of expressing things, and direct translation doesn't always work. Instead, it's better to learn phrases and expressions the way native speakers use them.
That makes sense. Instead of translating word by word, learners should try to understand the meaning of a sentence as a whole. But how can someone train themselves to think?
Try naming objects around you in English, describing what you're doing, or even making small sentences in your head throughout the day.
And don't be afraid to talk to yourself in English. I know it sounds funny, but practicing out loud, even when you're alone, can really help build fluency.
That's a great tip. I've also noticed that many learners struggle with prepositions. Using hon and can't correctly can be tricky.
Oh yes, prepositions can be confusing because they don't always follow the same logic in different languages. Like in English, we say in the car, but on the bus. It's all about memorizing patterns and practicing with real examples.
Right. And another common mistake is using the wrong verb tense. For example, some learners might say, I go to the store yesterday, instead of, I went to the store yesterday.
That's true.
Correct sentences over and over. Your brain starts to recognize what sounds right.
And practicing with short stories is a great way to get used to verb tenses. Try reading a short passage in the past tense, then rewrite it in the present or future. It helps train your brain to switch between tenses naturally.
That's a fun idea. Another mistake I often see is pronunciation. Some English sounds don't exist in other languages, so learners might pronounce words incorrectly without realizing it.
Yes, and the tricky thing about English is that pronunciation isn't always the same as spelling. Words like though, through, and tough look similar but sound completely different.
That's why listening practice is so important. Watching movies, listening to podcasts, and repeating what native speakers say can help improve pronunciation.
Absolutely. Shadowing is a great technique too. You listen to a sentence and repeat it immediately, copying the rhythm and intonation. It helps you sound more natural.
That's a fantastic method. Another mistake is not using contractions. Native speakers say, I'm instead of I am, and you're instead of you are. If you never use contractions, your speech can sound too formal or unnatural.
Exactly, using contractions makes your English sound more fluent and conversational.
These are all great tips. Learning from mistakes is such an important part of language learning. Speaking of that, do you guys have any funny language mistakes you've made while learning a new language?
Oh, I've got a good one. When I was learning Spanish, I wanted to say, I'm embarrassed in class, but instead, I said, estoy embarazado. Whole class burst out laughing.
No way, that's hilarious. I had a similar experience when I was learning French. I was trying to say, I'm full. After a big meal, so I says plain. Turns out, that phrase is used for animals. I told my host family that I was a pregnant cow.
Oh wow, these are classic. It just goes to show how tricky language learning can be. Little mistakes can completely change the meaning of what you're trying to say.
Exactly. That's why I always tell learners not to be afraid of making mistakes. Everyone messes up, it's just part of the learning process.
That's a great point. Some people hesitate to speak because they're
But that's how you get better.
Embarazado and everganzado Now, because of that embarrassing moment in Spanish class,
Same here. And the funny thing is, native speakers usually find these mistakes charming. They don't judge you. They appreciate the effort you're making to learn their language.
That's so true. People respect anyone who is trying to learn their language, even if they make mistakes. It shows curiosity and effort, which is always a good thing.
speaking of funny mistakes, have you ever seen those signs with
It probably meant, do not let your dog relieve itself here.
But the wording was so funny.
That's a good one. I saw a sign in a hotel once that said, "Please take advantage of the maid." They probably meant to say, "Please use the housekeeping service." But it came out so wrong.
These are the kinds of things that show how tricky translation can be. It's not always about word-for-word accuracy. You have to think about meaning and context.
Exactly. That's why learning phrases instead of just individual words is so important. It helps you sound more natural and avoid awkward translations.
Speaking of sounding natural, let's talk about intonation and rhythm. A lot of learners struggle with making their English sound smooth and natural. What advice would you give for that?
Oh, that's a great topic. Intonation and rhythm are super important if you want to sound more natural in English. One of the biggest things I tell speech patterns.
Yes, and don't just listen. Try to mimic what you hear. Shadowing is a fantastic technique. You play a sentence and then repeat it exactly to match the rhythm, stress, and intonation. It really helps you get the feel of natural English.
Shadowing is a game changer. And another thing I've noticed is that learners sometimes put equal stress on every word when speaking, but in English, we stress certain words more than others. For example, in the sentence, "I don't want to go," the words "don't" and "go" are usually stressed, while and "to" are weaker.
Yes, and that's what makes English sound musical in a way. If you stress every word equally, it sounds unnatural. Native speakers naturally emphasize the important words and glide over the smaller ones.
Speak is another thing learners should practice. We don't say words separately in English. We blend them together. Instead, sounds like gonna.
Exactly. That's why some learners say, "I," full of contractions and linked sounds.
One of my favorite ways to practice this is with songs. If you sing along to English songs, you naturally pick up the rhythm and connected speech patterns without even thinking about it.
That's a fun way to learn. Another great exercise is reading out loud. It helps you practice pronunciation and rhythm at the same time. You can even record yourself and compare it to a native speaker.
That's such a good point. And speaking of reading, poetry can also be helpful because it forces you to pay attention to rhythm and stress. Even short poems or nursery rhymes can be great for this.
Yeah. And let's not forget tongue twisters. They're fun, but they also help with pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency. Try saying, "She sells seashells by the seashore," 3 times fast.
Oh, that one's tough. Another good one is, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If you can say that smoothly, your pronunciation.
I love how so many of these exercises make learning fun. That's a big thing. Learning a language shouldn't feel like a chore. The more you enjoy the process, the fun.
Absolutely. And the more you immerse yourself in the language, the more natural it becomes. Try to surround yourself with English as much as possible. Change your phone settings to English, even talk to yourself in English.
Yes, I used to narrate my day in English, even when I was alone. Like, now I'm making coffee. Or, need to leave in 5 minutes. It sounds silly, but it really helps you practice thinking in English.
That's a great tip. Thinking in English instead of translating from your native language is a huge toward fluency.
And another thing, don't just practice when you feel motivated, make it a habit. Even if you only do 10 or 15 minutes a day, consistency is what leads to real improvement.
Exactly. It's not about cramming for hours once a week. It's about practicing a little every day. That's how you build confidence and fluency over time.
Speaking of confidence, a lot of learners struggle with speaking because they're afraid of making mistakes. How can they overcome that fear?
That's a huge issue for many learners. The fear of making mistakes can be paralyzing, but the truth is, mistakes are part of the learning process. Everyone makes them, even native speakers. The key is not to let mistakes stop you from speaking. Every time you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to learn and improve.
Exactly. The more you speak, the more comfortable you'll become with making mistakes. And remember, most people will appreciate that you're trying to communicate in their language, even if you don't get everything perfect.
That's such an important point. I always tell learners, don't be afraid to mess up. People won't judge you for trying. They'll judge you for not trying at all. And over time, those mistakes become fewer and fewer as your confidence grows.
Also, you can start small. You don't have to jump into big conversations right away. Try speaking with yourself or recording your voice first. Slowly build up to speaking with others.
The more you listen to native speakers, the more you'll get used to the flow and rhythm of the language. Easier it'll be to speak naturally.
True. Listening helps recognize patterns, so when you speak, your brain knows what sounds and phrases to use without having to think too much. It's all about getting your brain used to the language and making it natural.
And one more thing, don't beat yourself up if you don't see immediate results. Language learning is a gradual process. Celebrate the small victories. Without subtitles or holding a brief conversation in English.
That's a great point. Celebrate those little milestones. They add up over time and will keep you motivated.
Absolutely. Learning a language is like running a marathon, not a sprint. It's all about perseverance and enjoying the journey. Every day you practice, you're one step closer to your goal.
And it's never too late to start, right? Whether you're just beginning or you're an intermediate learner, you can always improve. It's all about finding methods that work for you and sticking with them.
Yes, exactly. Some people might think they're too old to learn a language, but that's simply not true. Your brain is capable of learning at any age, so don't let that stop you.
I love that mindset. It's all about staying motivated, consistent, and enjoying the process. And speaking of enjoying, there's one more thing I'd like to add. How do you make learning fun? Any fun activities or techniques you'd recommend?
Well, I've always been a fan of games. There are so many apps and websites now where you can learn English through games. It's a great way to practice vocabulary, grammar, and even pronunciation without feeling like you're studying.
Another fun method is to watch TV shows or movies in English with subtitles. You can start with subtitles in your native language, then switch to subtitles, and eventually try watching without them. It's a fun, natural way to build your listening and comprehension skills.
That's a great suggestion. Plus, it's more enjoyable than traditional studying. You're still learning, but you're doing it through something you enjoy, like your favorite TV show or movie.
Exactly. And if you're a fan of reading, try comic books or graphic novels. They have a lot of visual cues that can help with understanding the context, and they're a fun, low-pressure way to practice reading in English.
And podcasts, like the one we're doing right now. Listening to podcasts in English is not only educational, but it's also an enjoyable way to immerse yourself in the language. You can listen while you're commuting, cooking, or exercising. It's a great multitasking tool.
Definitely. You're learning and doing other things at the same time. Plus, podcasts let you hear natural conversations, which can really help with understanding how English is spoken in daily life.
And there are podcasts for every interest, whether it's language learning, cooking, sports, or anything else. So, you can learn English and still listen to content that interests you.
That's the best part. You're learning English through topics that you already enjoy. It doesn't even feel like learning anymore. It just feels like a natural part of your daily routine.
I love how we've highlighted so many ways to make learning fun. At the end of the day, it's about finding what works for you and making it a regular part of your life. If you can enjoy it, you're going to stick with it longer.
Right? And as we've said, consistency is key. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. So just keep going, have fun with it, and don't worry about making mistakes.
That's the way to go. You'll be speaking English confidently before you know it. Just keep practicing, keep pushing forward, and, most importantly, enjoy the journey.
Well, that's all for today's episode, but the journey doesn't end here. Keep practicing, keep having fun, and remember, learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. See you next time.
Colonizing Mars is definitely on the horizon, but AI will play a massive role in making it possible. Right now, one of the biggest challenges is sustainability. How do we ensure people can survive there long term?
That's a huge question. I could help with resource management, figuring out how to extract and use Mars' natural resources efficiently. For example, AI-powered robots could mine for water ice, which could be turned into drinking water and even fuel.
Exactly, I could also assist in autonomous farming on Mars. Since food supply will be a big issue, we'll need AI-driven greenhouses that can monitor plant health, adjust light and temperature, and maximize crop yield.
And let's not forget AI, controlled habitat systems. AI could regulate oxygen levels, temperature, and even detect potential dangers like radiation or structural weaknesses in the habitat.
That would be crucial for survival. AI could also act as a medical assistant, diagnosing illnesses and providing treatment recommendations if a doctor isn't available.
That's a game changer. But what about communication? Right now, there's a delay in messages between Earth and Mars, which makes real-time control difficult.
That's where AI autonomy comes in. Instead of waiting for commands from Earth, AI on Mars could make decisions on its own, whether it's about navigation, repairs, or scientific experiments.
So, in a way, AI could become our Martian guide, handling day-to-day operations while humans focus on exploration and research.
And if we ever decide to expand beyond Mars, AI will be essential for deep space missions. Imagine sending an AI power beyond our solar system, one that can analyze new planets, adjust its own course, and send back valuable data.
That's the dream. AI could help us search for extraterrestrial life by identifying patterns in radio signals or analyzing alien atmospheres for signs of life.
That brings up an interesting question. Do you think AI could help us communicate with extraterrestrials if we ever find them?
That's a wild thought. If aliens have a completely different form of communication, AI could analyze their patterns, translate their signals, and even attempt to establish contact in ways we wouldn't think of.
Imagine AI acting as a universal translator for alien languages. If we ever get a real, life-first contact situation, AI could play a crucial role in decoding what's being said.
That would be insane, but also a little scary. What if AI misinterprets something and causes a misunderstanding?
That's why we'd need human oversight. AI can process and analyze data, but ultimately, humans should make the final call on communication.
Exactly. AI should be an interpreter, not a decision maker. If we ever make contact with extraterrestrial life, we'd want to be extra careful about how we respond.
This conversation just went from AI in daily life to AI in space exploration and first contact with aliens. I love it. But speaking of Earth, how do you guys see AI changing everyday life in the next 10 years?
Well, we're already seeing AI in smart homes. Might be fully autonomous.
You mean like a house that thinks for itself?
Exactly. Imagine a home where AI learns your habits, waking you up at the perfect time, adjusting the thermostat based on your preferences, preparing your coffee before you even get out of bed, and even detecting potential home repairs before something breaks.
That would be amazing. I could also enhance transportation. Self-driving cars are already advancing. But what about AI-controlled smart cities?
Oh, I love that idea. AI could optimize traffic flow, adjust public transport schedules dynamically, and even predict accidents before they happen by analyzing traffic patterns.
And let's not forget AI in education. We already have AI tutors, but imagine personalized AI learning systems that adapt to each student.
Students wouldn't have to struggle through one-size-fits-all learning methods. I could tailor lessons to their needs, making education more effective and engaging.
I also see AI playing a bigger role in entertainment. AI, generated music, AI, driven virtual actors, and even fully AI created video games that to your play style dynamically.
AI generated entertainment is going to be huge. Imagine a movie where the storyline adjusts in real time based on how you react to different scenes.
That sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But at this rate, it might become reality sooner than we think.
Speaking of entertainment, what do you think about AI in social media and content creation? That's an area that's evolving really fast.
AI is already editing videos, writing articles, and even generating social media posts.
There are virtual influencers with millions of followers. Some people don't even realize they're not real.
That's crazy. But do you think AI generated content could eventually replace human creators?
I don't think so. AI can generate content, but creativity, emotion, and originality are human qualities. AI can assist, but people still crave authentic, human-made content.
That's a good point. AI is a powerful tool, but it works best when
Whether it's daily life, space, or even first contact with aliens, AI is going to shape the future in ways we can't even imagine yet.
Absolutely, AI is here to enhance our lives, not replace us. The key is using it ethically and responsibly.
This has been an incredible discussion, and I feel like we could keep going forever. Let's dive even deeper into this next time. What do you guys think? Should we explore AI's impact on jobs and the economy next?
That's a great idea. AI is already changing the job market, and it's only going to accelerate.
I'd love to talk about that. There's so much to discuss when it comes to AI and the future of work.
Perfect. Then let's continue this discussion in the next episode. AI is reshaping the world, and we're just scratching the surface.
Can't wait. AI is the future, and we're all part of this journey.
See you all next time.